Most people say World War II began on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. It's the date that's etched into our collective memory, the moment when the world seemed to change overnight. German tanks rolled across the border, and the world watched in shock as the first shots of a new, devastating conflict rang out. Britain and France declared war 2 days later, marking the official start of the conflict. Their leaders addressed anxious crowds, and families gathered around radios, hearing the news that peace in Europe was over. Soldiers mobilized, and the world braced for what would become the deadliest war in history. This date is clear and simple, a textbook moment when peace ended and war began. It's the story we're taught in school, the one that appears in every history book and documentary, a single day that changed everything. But history is rarely so black and white. The truth is far more complicated, filled with uncertainty, debate, and decisions made in smoky rooms and crowded streets. The invasion of Poland was not the first act, but the climax of a long, troubled build-up. Tensions had been rising for years, as political movements gained strength and old alliances frayed. To truly understand why war broke out, we need to look back at the years before 1939. The roots of conflict stretch deep into the past, through a web of events and choices that shaped the fate of nations. The real turning point wasn't 1939, but 1937, the year hope for peace truly died. In that year, the world's leaders faced mounting crises, and the sense of looming disaster grew stronger. In 1937, aggressors felt emboldened, and defenders of peace proved unwilling or unable to stop them. The world's response to these early acts of aggression set the stage for everything that followed, making 1937 a crucial year in the story of how the world slid into war. After World War I, the world tried to build a lasting peace with the League of Nations. The League promised collective security, but its foundation was weak. The Treaty of Versailles left Germany bitter and resentful, fueling extremism. The League itself was crippled, America never joined, and other powers were absent or reluctant. Britain and France, exhausted by war, hesitated to confront new threats. By 1937, the system had failed. Collective security was an empty promise. Dictators in Germany, Italy, and Japan saw that the world would not act. This realization gave them the green light for aggression. The 1930s were a decade marked by relentless turmoil and uncertainty. Crisis after crisis shook the world, leaving ordinary people anxious and leaders scrambling for solutions. The Great Depression had already devastated economies and shattered the sense of stability that many had taken for granted. Each new emergency exposed the glaring weakness of the League of Nations, the international body created to keep peace after World War I. Its promises of collective security rang hollow as events spiraled out of control. In 1931, Japan shocked the world by invading Manchuria, a resource-rich region in China. The move was bold, aggressive, and a direct challenge to the international order. The League of Nations issued protests and condemned the invasion, but Japan simply ignored their words, withdrew from the League, and continued its conquest without fear of reprisal. Just a few years later, in 1935, Mussolini's Italy launched a brutal invasion of Ethiopia, seeking to build a new Roman Empire and assert its power on the world stage. The League's response was feeble, sanctions were half-hearted, and Italy faced no real consequences. The world watched as aggression went unpunished. Instead of isolating Mussolini, Britain and France's hesitation and indecision only pushed him closer to Hitler, forging dangerous new alliances that would soon threaten Europe. In 1936, Hitler took his own gamble by remilitarizing the Rhineland, blatantly violating the Treaty of Versailles and testing the resolve of the Western powers. France and Britain, paralyzed by fear of another war, and distracted by their own troubles, did nothing. They missed a crucial chance to stop Hitler before his ambitions grew. Each unchecked act of aggression emboldened the dictators further, convincing them that the world's democracies lacked the will to resist. The repeated failures of the League sent a clear message to Hitler, Mussolini, and the Japanese militarists. The international community would not stand in their way. By 1937, the dominoes had truly begun to fall. Aggressors saw opportunity everywhere, and the world seemed powerless to stop them. The world order that was meant to prevent another catastrophic war was collapsing before everyone's eyes, leaving nations adrift in a sea of uncertainty. The path to global conflict was now wide open, with borders shifting and armies on the move. The stage was set for disaster, and the world would soon pay the price for its inaction. In November 1937, Hitler met secretly with his top military leaders in Berlin. The Hossbach Memorandum recorded his chilling intentions. Germany would expand by force, seeking living space in Eastern Europe. Hitler named Austria and Czechoslovakia as first targets and set a timeline for war. This was no longer about revising treaties. It was a blueprint for conquest. Some generals objected, fearing Germany wasn't ready, but Hitler dismissed their concerns. He believed Britain and France were too weak to intervene. Within months, Hitler replaced hesitant commanders with loyalists. By the end of 1937, Germany was committed to war. The question was no longer if, but when. While Europe edged toward war, Asia was already burning. The continent was gripped by chaos and violence, as tensions that had simmered for years finally erupted into open conflict. In the East, the world watched as a new and devastating chapter of history began to unfold. On July 7, 1937, a clash at the Marco Polo Bridge near Beijing sparked a full-scale war between Japan and China. What started as a seemingly minor skirmish quickly spiraled out of control, drawing both nations into a brutal and relentless struggle for dominance. What began as a minor incident quickly escalated. Within days, fighting spread across northern China, engulfing towns and villages in violence. The world was stunned by the speed and ferocity of the conflict. Japanese forces poured in, capturing Beijing and Tianjin with overwhelming force. The rapid advance of the Japanese military left Chinese defenders reeling, and the cities soon fell under occupation. The conflict spread to Shanghai, leading to brutal urban warfare. Fierce battles raged in the streets, turning the city into a devastated battleground. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, and the destruction was immense. The world watched as Japanese troops unleashed atrocities, shocking observers with their brutality. Reports of mass killings, looting, and terrorized civilians began to circulate, painting a grim picture of the unfolding war. Most infamously, the rape of Nanking would become a symbol of the war's horror. In just a few weeks, hundreds of thousands of civilians were killed, and countless others suffered unspeakable violence at the hands of the invaders. Unlike earlier land grabs, this was an all-out assault on China. The Japanese military launched a massive campaign, determined to subjugate the nation and expand their empire at any cost. The war in Asia was now a major front, drawing global attention. International journalists reported from the front lines, and the world's eyes turned to the escalating crisis in the Far East. The Marco Polo Bridge incident marked the start of a wider, more savage conflict. It was the spark that ignited years of suffering and set the stage for even greater turmoil to come. Asia's war would soon merge with Europe's, creating a truly global crisis. The battles in China foreshadowed the worldwide conflict that was about to engulf the planet. 1937 was the year the firestorm began, a year that changed the course of history and set the world on a path toward total war. In 1937, world leaders made fatal miscalculations. Democracies believed appeasement could satisfy dictators and preserve peace. Haunted by World War I, leaders like Chamberlain hoped concessions would avoid another catastrophe. But Hitler and his allies saw appeasement as weakness, not goodwill. Each time the democracies failed to act, the aggressors grew bolder. The more the Allies appeased, the more dangerous the world became. By 1937, both sides were locked into a cycle: appeasement on one side, aggression on the other. The world was drifting toward disaster, step by step. Historians once saw the wars in Europe and Asia as separate, but 1937 proved they were linked. Aggression in one region emboldened aggression in the other. The Anti-Comintern Pact of 1936 and Italy's entry in 1937 formalized the Axis alliance. Japan's war in China distracted Britain, France, and the US, making them hesitant to confront Germany. Hitler counted on this distraction to pursue his own ambitions in Europe. The war in China stretched the democracies thin, weakening their resolve. Events in Asia and Europe fed off each other, creating a single, spiraling crisis. By 1937, the world's conflicts were merging into one. The global order was unraveling. The crisis of 1937 exposed a clash between democracy and dictatorship. Democracies like Britain and France moved slowly, constrained by public opinion and debate. Memories of World War I and economic hardship made their leaders cautious. Dictatorships, by contrast, acted swiftly. Decisions were made by a single leader or a small clique. Hitler, Mussolini, and Japan's military leaders could take risks and move fast. They saw democratic deliberation as weakness. This imbalance gave dictatorships a dangerous advantage. The contest between systems was tragically unequal. 1937 showed how quickly democracies could be outmaneuvered. Looking back, 1937 stands as a warning. Wars don't start with a single event. They build through years of missteps and missed chances. The Hossbach Memorandum and the Marco Polo Bridge incident locked the world onto a path to war. Appeasement didn't prevent conflict, it encouraged it. The lesson: early, firm resistance to aggression is essential. 1937 reminds us that small failures can lead to catastrophe. The dynamics of power, ambition, and fear are timeless. The secret year that made World War II inevitable still has lessons for us today.